You guys, welcome back to Faith Unraveled. Today we've got a different kind of episode because we're going to be answering questions that we've had submitted, questions about deconstruction, questions to us personally. And I just have to say, since this is our 5th episode that will be airing on Faith Unraveled on YouTube, I just have to say how amused I am by the comments that we get from active members, whether I'm wearing a bra, too much shoulders, mostly men, but there was one woman in the comments, I was actually on TikTok, who got violently angry about the fact that I was losing an eyelash. And it's just funny because literally when I posted that video, I thought to myself, oh shit, I'm losing an eyelash. And then I had to remind myself, like, Alicia, you're in the don't give a fuck era.
Yeah.
You're going to leave that eyelash just the way it is. And she came in, you know, that mother of Jordan Turpin, she had like the house of like 10 kids and they were found by a police officer when one of the kids escaped and called 911. Was that
Temecula you're talking about?
It might have been.
Or Marietta or something like that.
This woman commenting on my eyelash, no joke, she reminded me of the Turpin mom. I was thinking she's got to be like, you hear about these fundamentalists out of like East Idaho, no shade to East Idaho, but this woman's comment really, I mean, she was like, let me get that eyelash and rip it off for you. It's just amusing.
I know you get some fun comments, huh?
Why don't you get those kind of comments? But what I mean to say is that they're all regarding the way that I look.
Well, they feel threatened, right? That's
what else do you say? What else do you say to a video of Brad Wilcox telling everybody that we're leaving the church because of a popular trend on TikTok?
They take our comments personally, and so they want to make personal attacks because of that.
We have to laugh about it. It's part of the healing process.
It is.
Okay, so for today's episode, we're going to look at questions from the community. If you would like to submit questions,
yeah, we would love to answer them.
Nothing is off limits.
Yeah.
I mean, that doesn't mean we're going to answer it in a way that we're comfortable answering. But I'm taking questions on Instagram, Faith Unraveled, in the DMs. You know that Ask Me Anything, that little prompt? I think I can put that in my highlights and then people can just keep contributing to it if they want to.
I like
keep
that
on
idea.
Asking.
So you're going to put it in your Instagram?
Yeah, so it'll be on Instagram. So if you want to submit a question. But we had 4 really cute questions this morning and last night. So cute questions, meaning I liked them. Okay. The first one, if you were the prophet of the LDS Church, what would be your first action taken?
First action taken.
I know what mine would be.
What would yours be?
Well, I have to credit our friend Rob on Exmo TikTok, who actually made a video for President Nelson saying, as the acting president of the church, it is in your power to remove the sealing of Joseph Smith to Jane Manning James, who was sealed to him as a Black woman, sealed to him as a servant in the afterlife. So I like that idea. I think the first thing that should happen is that sealing should be canceled. But then the next thing that I think needs to happen, and that I would do if I was the prophet of the Mormon Church, is that I would just declare that none of us were speaking for God.
Do you think they speak for God?
I don't think that they speak for God. No. And I think that it gets them into a lot of trouble because they say that they are speaking for God. Because think about what kind of advice is being given over the pulpit and incredibly harmful to so many families. And so if people were just to say like, that's Russell's opinion. Mm-hmm. Rusty's got an opinion on a lot of things I don't agree with. A lot of members of the church do approach it that way. That's kind of the nuanced Mormon style. That wasn't my style.
So you use Rusty. Is that derogatory?
Don't you think people called him Rusty as a kid?
I don't know. I don't know. I know.
Take off that crown, Rusty.
I know that a bunch of ex-Mormons call him Rusty. I don't know.
I'm fine calling him Rusty. I think that's a cute name.
Okay.
Okay. So what would you do if you were prophet? What would be the first thing you would do?
Would open up everything in the vault. I think they have a number of things that they are hidden in their vault from early church history. I would probably open all that up right away so that everybody can see it and read it and see what exactly went on back then. I think there is a lot of, my guess is journals are contradicting the narrative. And so I'm all about transparency on the narrative. I think they haven't been really good at the transparency on the narrative. I shared in my faith deconstruction, if they were up front, maybe I wouldn't have taken the path that I did. Now, let me restate this. I am totally happy with the path I have taken. So I'm not saying that I regret anything or want to do something different, but I do think very much they need to be transparent for all those who are out there. They need to know like what those truth claims are all about.
So what you're saying is you want the church to stop being a narcissistic organization that benefits from the narrative that they've created and control.
I want them to be open and transparent. Then there's some people who do all their research and they still become a member of the church, and that's totally fine. But what I have a hard time with is you're living your life for like 45 years, you're taught one narrative, and it's not even close to what reality is.
Consent.
Yeah, and exactly.
Informed consent.
You lose consent when you do that, and
right.
that's my biggest issue.
Yeah. I think this is a great plan. I mean, if I became the prophet, that would mean that we've already made a few big strides, right?
Yeah, women would get the priesthood at that point in time.
What is going to happen when this older generation dies off?
It'll be interesting to see because there's certain social issues that are going to be boiling up, I believe, in the church. One is women and the other one's LGBT. I believe both of those will boil up and they're going to have to address it somehow.
Those are the two prevailing issues.
Mm-hmm.
But there's still remnants of the issues from the priesthood ban. And so even when stuff resolves, it still leaves issues.
Yeah, you're still going to have to deal with that in your head, right? So... and that goes back to the consent conversation again.
Society is starting to wake up to these different issues, and eventually it will be completely unheard of to have an organization that has a big worldwide conference where only a couple women speak and like dozens of men have the pulpit. Yeah. So the other thing that I think has to devolve first is a personality type. It's this like heavy-handed narcissist, kind of lies when they need to lie. And there's a lot, like we just saw that footage of Brad Wilcox, I mean, I'm going to say he was lying about this kid he had a conversation with. Apparently the kid said to him, I left the church because it was popular on TikTok. Like every single person in the comments is calling bullshit on it. And not one member of the church has come in to say, oh, I believe him. I mean, I think it's just embarrassing, but we've seen Nelson do this. And I think that is going to be less likely to happen with this new, younger generation of apostles coming up. So what's going to happen when you have a group of men running the church, probably still men, that aren't as egocentric and narcissistic as the ones leading the church now? Like, what's going to happen to the organization? So
the one thing I think you have to look at, as far as the ones that are leading the church now, is this is how they were taught and raised, right?
Right.
This is no different than what David O. McKay did with Von Brody and kind of how I'm pushing them out. Ezra Taft Benson, Spencer W. Kimball. I mean, we can go down, and this type of persona has been around since Joseph Smith. I mean, Joseph Smith felt totally comfortable with lying to Emma. He was sleeping with a bunch of women and was very comfortable lying to Emma about it. And honestly, lying to the whole church organization, saying, hey, I don't practice polygamy, right? That all the Relief Society presidency signed a document saying, oh, we don't practice polygamy. And the only one that didn't really know was Emma. Everybody else was in relationships with either Joseph or Heber or Brigham. Yeah. So crazy. I think that this persona or personality has been around since Joseph Smith. And it went into when they went and migrated to Salt Lake City with Brigham Young and how he ran the church. It went into John Taylor, Wilford Woodruff. I mean, this persona has been around since day one. And
the way that I view this is that when you've got men in a patriarchal structure where they have power, they remain unchecked and unaccountable. Nobody is challenging them. And so they just kind of devolve into this state of delusion where they're willing to lie if they need to lie. And they just assume that everyone is just going to believe what they say. And that's what I think was so notable about this commentary from Brad Wilcox, is that it was so obviously a fabrication at best. And he just had no question about doing it. And when you compare that to the messages that we as women get to not criticize, never criticize, sisters, it's fascinating womanhood. Like, you lay yourself down to allow your priesthood holder to do whatever the hell he wants. And so you just see men behaving badly around every corner. It's always going to be a narcissistic organization as long as you have these dudes running the show. Okay, so let's go on to the next question. How was it to try new things like alcohol, weed, and coffee?
Oh, maybe this is the time we go into our story from November when you first deconstructed and we had a Palm Springs trip going. So I think we shared this in I don't know which episode we were.
We didn't share the whole story
for
sure.
We didn't share the whole story, but Alicia had just deconstructed, no longer believed. We were going to Palm Springs and decided to try alcohol together for the first time. And so we were at a restaurant and we were like, oh, let's do wine, because we thought wine would taste like grape juice. And so we're like, let's do that. And we order, I don't know, it was like a cab or something. It was like a $14, $15 glass.
Like, give us the best glass you
have.
No,
it wasn't the
It was like $28 for a glass.
It was. I know it was expensive when we tried it because we thought
you're like chugging it by the end. I'm like, what are you doing? You're like, I don't want to waste it.
I don't want to waste it. 20. We took one sip, or I took one sip, and I'm like, oh my goodness, this is the worst tasting thing ever.
We have the palate of a 3-year-old.
Yeah. Well, I expected something sweet, right? I expected something to taste like grape juice because
it was going to be Cadem.
Yeah, that was what in my mind I thought it would taste like. Oh my goodness.
Maybe a little bit like kombucha, kind of like a grape juice kombucha.
Yeah, that wasn't good at all, right?
Well, so on the way home that night, we stopped at a dispensary and I wanted to get some edibles. Partly because I was like, well, I'd love to be able to feel something this weekend. And since I apparently hate alcohol, let's go ahead and, get some cannabis. So we go to this cannabis shop in Palm Springs.
First time we've ever taken edibles.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so we don't know how long does it last. We don't know what the effects are. And
or how long it takes to kick in.
Yeah. And we were asking all these questions to the lady and she's explaining, but I don't think we really understood what we were getting ourselves into.
So we get back to the hotel room, but before we go into the hotel room, I'm already on maybe my third edible. I want to say they were 10 milligrams each.
They could have been 10 milligrams.
Yeah. So I was like on my third one, and I want to say I had 5.
I think we had 4. So we hit 40. We were in between 40 and 50.
Yeah.
We'll just say
and
that.
I had also a Bailey's coffee creamer at the restaurant too.
You did.
So that was the other thing.
So
I've got caffeine in my system. I've got Bailey's in my system, and I've got now 40 to 50 milligrams of cannabis.
So get to the hotel that we were at. We take one, you take one. We're not feeling it after like 10 minutes. So we're like, let's take another one. You take another one. I take another one. We wait another 5 minutes and we're like, we are still not feeling it. So we start taking another one, right? Yeah. It was like 30 minutes into it and we still didn't feel anything. And so we were at between, like you said, 4 or 5 of these together, whole edibles.
We were really hoping for just feel silly. Everything is kind of funny.
A good buzz.
Yeah.
Right?
And we had about 5 minutes of that. And then it hit. I was like in my underwear saying, oh, wouldn't it be funny if we went down to the pool and I was wearing my underwear? I was like bent over laughing. I was like laughing so hard. And then all of a sudden it was just like, boom, boom. It was just like a scary movie. All of a sudden the anxiety hit. And I'm just like, oh my gosh, I'm in hell right now. Like
the paranoia.
I wasn't actually having visuals, but it was kind of as if my whole reality were in a kaleidoscope. The short-term memory loss was insane. Yeah. There was one point, and I'll never forget it, it was, what time is it? Because I just kept thinking, if I could just go to sleep. And I couldn't fall asleep. And I just remember thinking, my kids are going to have to visit me in a mental institution.
Because you had the anxiety going
I
big
literally,
time.
what if this never changes? What if I never get back to normal? And so I'm freaking out. I'm on the ground. I keep changing my state. I keep trying to look on my phone like, does anyone die from a cannabis overdose? And they say like, nobody's ever died of a cannabis overdose. But you're going like, what happens when you get really, really stoned? And it was just so bad. And at one point I was like trying to fall asleep, and I would feel like I fell asleep for a little while, maybe like woke up like an hour later. I'm like, what time is it? And he says 6:30, which was what he said 20 seconds ago when I thought it was 2 hours ago. And then I ask again, like close my eyes again, feel like another hour goes by. What time is it now? Still 6:30. I probably asked you what time it was within the 6:30 minute. And I probably asked you 4 times.
Yeah, I felt so bad too. I felt like I couldn't believe the situation to get to the point it did. And I felt bad for you. You were on the floor, just totally paranoid, a lot of anxiety. And I'm like, hey, I think we need some water. Let's go get some water. You're like, that would be great. I'm like blasted out of my mind too. Like I had as much as she had, but I don't have the anxiety going on. I don't know why I didn't have the anxiety
You were
going.
so worried about me getting dehydrated. And we had gone through all the water bottles in the hotel room.
Yeah. And so I had to walk from the place we're at back to the front.
It's like
desk.
these little cottages on this resort and a property, and they all look exactly the same.
Yes. And so I'm like walking, and I probably took me an hour and a half to get back.
I thought you were never coming back.
I had to like focus. Okay, where am I?
So blitzed.
Yeah. And keep on walking. And I know when I asked the person for, hey, is there any way I can get water? I think I was looking like off in the distance, asking the question. And he's like, oh, I bet you this guy's totally out.
They're like, what hotel room are you in? And you're like, I don't remember.
Yeah.
Like, what is your name?
Yeah.
And you're like, I don't remember.
I didn't say that.
It was pretty bad.
Yeah. I was trying to be like incognito on how stoned I was. So
I was really relieved when you made it back. Okay, what I want to say about this though, like just asking like, what's your experience with cannabis and coffee? There's only one person in our house that drinks coffee every day, and it's one of my adult kids. And I think it's so endearing. I love waking up to the smell of coffee in my house.
He drinks it all the time.
Yeah, but I'm not really that big into coffee.
Yeah, I don't like coffee. So
I like it. I just am not. I guess I just don't feel like I need it every day.
Yeah. It just doesn't taste good to me. I have now developed a taste for alcohol. Like my favorite alcohol drink is tequila.
I like that you're calling it alcohol, because you know it's such a trope that when people leave the church, they're like, oh, I'll take an
alcoholic beverage.
I'll take some alcohol.
Yeah.
Like, what does that mean?
Yeah.
But what I wanted to say is I think that these substances all kind of like open something new in us. And I know I said that in our last episode talking about the unraveling of our identity, but I feel like having had a few drinks, it just brings something out in you. Like I could not have just like danced to EDM music, club music, hip hop music. I could have never like broken out of my shell in the way that I am now. It woke something up in me, a part of me that I didn't know existed. Yeah. And so alcohol isn't something that I rely on for a good time, but I'm glad that I've experimented with it because it just kind of opened something up in me. But I do love cannabis. Yeah. So
we bought all this alcohol, and we have an alcohol cupboard, and we barely use it.
Yeah, we bought all this alcohol in the beginning thinking like, oh, we're gonna...
Yeah. We're just not big drinkers. We know people that have a beer a day or drink beer all the time or have a glass of wine. We just haven't been
it's just like whatever works for you.
Yeah.
And then what was the third one? Alcohol. I like how we call it cannabis. Like it's weed. Yeah. But for some reason when we leave the church we feel better saying like cannabis instead of just like weed or marijuana or pot.
Yeah.
A lot of times I say edibles. I feel like it's more socially acceptable.
I think the issue you have with edibles is you can't regulate how much you're taking. It takes 30 minutes before you feel it, right? So if you
Right.
take one, it takes 30 minutes, you start feeling it. If it's not hitting you enough, then you're going to take another one. It takes 30 minutes before you start feeling the next one. So,
Oh, and another thing to warn people about too is that a lot of people get anxiety when
Yeah.
they smoke pot.
yeah.
So you have to,
Yeah,
do what works best for you. There's like, you don't have to. You don't have to. Psychedelics were big for me. It was a big part of my healing process, but not everybody's going to do mushrooms after a faith crisis, But I think psychedelics can be a huge component
for religious trauma.
Yeah, I just saw that Natasha Helfer's Symmetry Solutions
Doing
Counseling Center.
ketamine, right?
Yeah, they are incorporating ketamine, which is exciting. I've never used ketamine, but I have used other psychedelics. And yeah, like I feel like that was a huge part of the
Very
healing.
stabilizing for you
Yeah.
and got you.
And I'm happy to talk more about that if people want. Anything else to say on that?
Mm-mm.
Okay, this is really good. Okay, so I've got two really good ones. Okay, we're gonna do this one first. What is it like at big family holiday get-togethers now that you've left Mormonism? Do you want to answer this one first, or do you want me to go first?
I can go first because yours is longer. Mine, I think I shared this in my faith deconstruction. The family right now, I've taken some space from, not all members of my family, and partially because of the way they've handled the faith crisis. I love them dearly, each one of them, but it's problematic feeling as a disappointment, or there are certain mindsets that come along with Mormonism, and I struggle being around those mindsets.
For the first time in my life, I understand why people who are inactive didn't come around.
Yeah.
I always wondered, like, why in our big family reunions do people who leave the church not come?
Yeah.
And now I finally get it. For one thing, if you're talking publicly about your deconstruction, there's going to be a good chance that there's people that you miss and you wanted to give a hug to that walk away when you walk near them. So that's a real thing.
Yeah. They take you leaving as a personal attack on themselves.
Oh,
right?
you're doing the worst thing that anyone could ever do. Yeah. So not going to go into too much more detail about that one, but that was horrible. And so that makes me not want to go to a family reunion for sure again. But for people, just maybe they're not talking about it publicly, but maybe people don't go to family stuff because it's so triggering, and they know that their family members think less of them and they've lost their seat at the table. And it's hard. That's hard. Big family get-togethers are definitely tough after leaving the church if your family is still active LDS.
I totally get that. They feel personally attacked because you are so outward spoken against the church. And they look at it as that pearl of great price, right? The church is that very important thing for them, and you are attacking it. So they take it personally.
All right, our last question for today. This is a good one. Even though I've deconstructed, I get panic attacks about not raising my child Mormon. That's a really good one.
Yeah.
My thought is on this, understanding how indoctrination takes form is really helpful. You've got the logical part of your brain, which is where the belief system unravels fairly easily, because once you see that Joseph Smith was a treasure seeker as a child, that like everyone in the world can see that the church is demonstrably false, that the truth claims are demonstrably false. And anyone with logic who takes time to compute that is going to come up with a similar conclusion. Now, the part of the brain that involves emotion and experience, and especially for me, like all of the most painful experiences of my life were attached to my testimony, then it becomes a much more difficult issue, because it's not just your logical brain that is convinced of this. It's your emotions. You've got like this real fear instilled in you that like, this is the only way. And so you kind of almost feel a little bit of a battle between the emotional part of the brain and the pragmatic part of the brain. And to be honest, I feel like it just takes time. We always tell everyone this, it takes a year for every decade
Yeah,
that you were in the church. Someone told us that.
Yeah.
We've told a couple people that, and I think it really is true. I think just time and exposure. For me, it was helpful to continue to expose myself to the realities of the church. And I think that's why most of us kind of perseverate on this for a while, on the ex-Mormon stuff, on the anti-literature, because there's a part of our brain that is so worried. You're just so worried that you're wrong. Like, what if I'm wrong? It's like, there's no way you could be wrong. Look at this stuff. And it's comforting to review it, to look at the church history. God damn it. Go watch all of the LDS discussion series on Mormon stories. Like, that series is really going to help you see, like, there's just no way this stuff is real.
Well, it's peeling the onion. It's the indoctrination that we've talked about so much, and it takes time to peel that onion.
Absolutely.
You can't go right to the core like that. If you were in 40 years, it's going to take time to pull that or peel that onion. Now, if you left when you're 18 years old, before your brain was fully developed, before you got married and was indoctrinated and had kids and had to start teaching your kids this, it may be a very different place. You might have some indoctrination you have to peel, but it's maybe not like years of indoctrination.
That's such a good point. If all of the most emotionally driven experiences of your life, having children, having loss, if all of that was attached to your testimonies, that's going to be really, really hard to deconstruct with. So
you could be 45 years in the church, but never really believe too.
Oh, right.
And that might not cause the indoctrination or the unraveling of the onion too. So I think it depends on how orthodox or how all in you were during that period of time.
Absolutely. So I would say time is one thing, and then exposure is the other.
Yep.
So exposure to the history, exposure to stuff that shows you that it's not true. So that way you can see the logic, but also exposure to other people outside of the cave. Because if all you're ever hearing is we're praying for you to come back, and they're trying to tell stories about the prodigal child and how that person came back and they know you can come back too. And my brain really gets messed up when I get into the cave with people and I start talking about it, and everyone around me is an active, faithful, believing member. It can really be a mind fuck. So I've had situations where I'm going to an event and I have a friend that was in my ward, and she'll call me or I'll call her and say do you want to go to this together? Because just having one person to ground you, finding your footing in reality is really, really important. So if you're going to go to something like a funeral in a Mormon church building, having one person with you that can help you stay grounded in reality is really helpful, because it's true. It can really knock you off your feet emotionally. Yeah. We're just panicked. It's why am I panicked? Because you are so well indoctrinated.
And so I would say my first year when we first left the church, I realized that my son might not go on a mission. And I felt sad about that. And partially it's because I was only 1 year out at that time. And I looked back at my mission and I looked at it as a very positive experience for who I was. I feel very different now than I did back then when I was only 1 year out. Now I'm, I don't have any sadness whatsoever that my son has not served a mission, because what I've come to the conclusion of is you can gain that outside of a mission. You can gain those same experiences and those same skills outside of a mission, and people can be very good people by not serving missions. And so, but it took me a couple years to unravel that in my own mind to get there. All three of our kids are out. And so it becomes...
Oh, that was another question that we got. What happened to the kids? So when we deconstructed, our kids were 10, 17,
and 21.
And 21.
Yeah, the most interesting one was our daughter, who was more nuanced. We thought she'd have no problem with us leaving.
Be excited about us leaving.
She took it the hardest. It was really hard for her because she felt like she was losing friendships. She was losing mentors, I would say, right? She had a number of mentors that she would have considered in in our ward that she felt now disconnected from. And partially what that was because how vocal you were being on TikTok. And she started seeing that people were distancing themselves from us. And so there was a lot of sadness. She had many tears, multiple nights. And I think it's gotten better, but I think she still, still struggles with it.
One thing she said to me is like, the parents that I grew up with are like gone. Mm-hmm. So even though she loves this version of us, it's also a mourning period for her. Like that's also like something that we definitely need to be sensitive to, that it's not just exciting that we're like these different people. When you're a kid and you grow up in a home where it's like half the time she would ask me about something, I'd tell her like, I need to pray about it. You know what I mean? That's a really different, I really do feel like I'm a different person. I was so masked up at that point, but there's also beautiful parts of the Mormon home life culture. I miss us not coming together every night for prayer and scripture. And you feel kind of like an idiot just being like, can everyone come in here? I just want to see your faces and hear how school was. I mean, you can do that once in a while, but with the church, you have like this impending doom of like not doing the things, because if you want your family to be righteously raised up in the church, you got to be consistent with those things. There's just no excuses for missing a night of prayer and scripture. And that was my take. Mm-hmm. But we said we were going to have family home evening, and we haven't really done that. That was actually one of the things the kids suggested. Like, can we keep doing family night? It's
a trigger for me, so that's the reason why I don't do that.
He's like, we have family night all the time.
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel about that. But going back to our daughter, I think it's been an adjustment for her, which is surprising. Our youngest, I think he's like sayonara. I think he has moved on. He moved the quickest past it.
Yeah.
I think the 21-year-old, I think he had 1 foot in and 1 foot out. But I mean, he
may continue that way because he loves the Mormon village. Mm-hmm. We got some amazing kids his age that are just.
He went to track after we deconstructed. He went
High Adventure.
High Adventure. That's what it is. Sorry.
You're losing the vernacular.
I'm losing the vernacular, which is a good thing. I want to completely lose it myself. But he still operates kind of with a lot of member friends. And so I think he still has 1 foot in, 1 foot out. And we're fine with that, whatever fits him.
Just to drive home the answer to this question, the reason that you feel fearful about not raising your kids in the church, like that is normal. Mm-hmm. That feeling of panic is normal. What it means is that you were really indoctrinated. So were we.
But I'll say it's there, like you still have the indoctrination. If you're fearful, you potentially have the indoctrination that the kids will go wayward outside of the church. And as I have gotten further down the road, I think I said this in the last episode, that all paths are good. Like as long as they're not harming people and they're building connections.
I would not say that all paths are good. Okay. I would say all paths are valid.
All paths are valid.
Some will lead to better places than others. Like when you deconstruct, you start to think about things like the consequences of your actions, opening or closing opportunities for yourself. These are the kind of conversations that become more relevant. But I would be lying if I said that there aren't some times that I worry, like this Mormon formula, it really does generate, men who are successful.
But the point I'm making is you have a lot of people who are not Mormon that are very successful out there. You have a lot of people who are Mormon that live on an authentic life and love what they do and who they are. You don't have this prescribed path that you have to follow.
Yeah.
He can now build his own path and follow whatever he wants, or my daughter can potentially do that.
The first couple of years are absolutely the hardest. And I think this is why so many people left during COVID, because it was just your opportunity to see what it would be like to miss church.
And the reason why they're the hardest is because you're still indoctrinated and you're still pulling the onion, I believe. And you're still like trying to figure out like what is your new value system? What is okay?
Yeah, absolutely. All right, you guys, we're going to go ahead and close out. If you liked today's episode and you liked the format, go ahead and chime in and let us know, because we would love to keep doing this if this is something that's useful to you. And again, submit your questions on Instagram DMs at Faith Unraveled, and we will get to your questions. It was fun.
Yeah.
All right.
Thanks.